In this video, I'm going to talk about how to bring in an image that serves as a background. So I'm in one of my SketchUp models, and I've got it set to one of the default or one of the already loaded styles that's in the software. But I'm going to work on getting an image into this file. One of the first things that we're going to need to do is check where we are in terms of the horizon. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to go to, let's see, the south elevation. And I'm going to set it to be a parallel projection because right now it's set up into, it's defaulting to a perspective view of the elevation. So with the parallel view, I'm going to get a more true elevation. Right, so we'll move this over, close this. All right, now one thing you can see with the red axis line here is that my model, the top of my model, is at basically 0 feet on the vertical axis. And, you know, if you think about what this pavilion is, how it would really be, well, how it's intended to be designed, it's going to be sitting on a larger ground plane, and we will create one of those within this video. But the first thing that I'm going to need to do is raise it up so that it's sitting at the bottom. So the bottom of it is sitting up here. Now, this extrusion or this press pull process, we brought it down 36 inches. So I need to move everything up 36 inches. So I've changed the style to this default style so you can get a better sense of what I'm talking about. So right now the horizon, and this is going to be important for us to bring in this image, is set to the top of the plane. And if we create a ground plane, we want that ground to have this relationship to the horizon. This will also set us up for some later image downloads that we're going to do of these true orthographic views, the elevations, plans, and sections, and that sort of thing. So what I need to do is basically make sure that everything is turned on and everything is unlocked, move everything up, and then I'll go back and relock things and hide things that, you know, I need to be hidden in order to proceed. This might be a good opportunity to sort of eliminate some things in there that you don't need as well. I'm going to my tags and I'm just going to check and make sure that everything is turned on. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the display and make sure that hidden objects are appearing. And I'll go to a 3D view so I can get a better sense of what's happening. And I'll kind of orbit around. Okay. Now, the next thing that I need to do is unlock everything. So I'm going to make a window around everything, right click and unlock. All right, so now I should be able to move everything. And then I'll go back to that south elevation. I'll hit Shift Z so that I can see everything in the view. And I will make a window around everything using the move command. I'm going to make sure my vertical axis line is appearing. And actually you can see that some items got left behind. So I'll look into that in a moment. 36 inches. Okay, looks like it was my benches. So I turned off the ground layer, and what I can see are there's a few figures that were placed on the ramp, and that's why they're below the top of the platform. And the bicycle rider was also put at the bottom, like outside of the pavilion. But some of these elements looks like they need to be corrected. So I'm going to move them up to the top of the platform where they should be. So I've moved everything so that it's in its proper spot. And now what I'm going to do is go and turn some layers back on, and I'm going to start locking things so they don't move around on me. So I'm backing out to a 3D view, I'm going to make a window around it. And I had already started locking some things, but I'll just unlock and then relock everything in the model, and I can sort of unlock things as needed. Going back to one of my scenes, and one thing that you can see is that there's a horizon that's passing across the back of the image. I'm going to add a mass that represents the floor, and that will help to kind of make the framing of some of these images a little bit easier. But one thing I wanted to do before I proceed with that is I had created this layer called ground. And as you can see, the stairs, the ramp, and the platform are on that layer. I'm going to rename this to a different title. Instead of ground, I'm going to, so by the way, to rename a tag, you can click on the edit tag tool right there. I'm going to name this platform. And I'm going to say, okay. And what I'm going to do is create a new tag, and I'm actually going to call it ground, because that's technically what this lower level is going to be. Okay, so hit okay. So now when I go to all the elevations and set it to parallel projection, I should see this relationship of the platform to the horizon, just going around. So south, east elevation, north elevation, west elevation. Now what I'm going to do is create a plane that will serve as the ground plane. So I'm going to create a rectangle. How big should this rectangle be? You know, I would just make it quite large. So there's the pavilion right there. And I'll just create a rectangle that's, you know, approximately this big. I'm going to go to the 3D view, and I'm going to use the press pull to extrude it down. You know, what distance you make doesn't really matter. I'll give it some thickness like this much. Then I'm going to select it all. And I should be able to select everything in the view because the other things have been locked. And I'm going to group them. And I'm going to lock it. I might change the material later. And actually, I'm going to unlock it first, and then I'm going to assign a tag to it. The new tag that I created called ground. And now I'll lock it. So when I go to tags, if I needed to turn that layer off, I could. Okay. Now I had already made a bunch of scenes in here. And one thing that you'll notice is that the position of the camera did not change when I did the whole moving of the platform up to 36 inches up. So now all of my my horizon lines, basically the horizon line in a perspective is the height at which your eyes are. They're all now dropped 36 inches. So I'm going to need to make some adjustments, perhaps delete some of my scenes and recreate a few of them. Basically, it looks like I'm like sitting down. That's the height I am. And I'd like for my views to be more at eye height than standing, so that I'm kind of simulating what it might look like if someone were walking through the space. So you want to kind of get a couple of scenes ready that have the proper eye height. So one way to do this, I'm going to hit the short key H, and I'm just going to move downward a little bit. Now you can see, how do you know if you're at the eye height level? Well, basically, I can see the reference line of the horizon back there. And as soon as the scale figure's eyes are, roughly on that line, I know I'm kind of in a position where I would be standing and looking into the distance. So once I have that set, I will create a new scene that I can return to later. So I can see there's a scene 10 here, and you may find it's easier to start renaming these. If I click in this cell, I could adjust it to be, give it a name that is one that you're going to be working with the background images, but whatever's sort of easier for you to work with at this point. Now we can begin talking about the images that you might bring in. So one thing to keep in mind, if I do maintain this perspective where I'm looking with my eyes basically at the horizon, with respect to the sky image that you choose, you need to be a little bit careful. If you look straight up into the sky, I did some Google searching for some skies. You might see a sky that looks something like this, okay? These are looking straight up or at a slight angle from the horizon. But if you're looking toward the horizon, the cloud shapes and forms are going to change. They may have more definition towards the top, but then as we get down to the horizon, they're going to get fuzzier, maybe a little bit like the color will desaturate a little bit. And basically, it's because you're seeing those clouds through moisture in the air, and you're also seeing them in perspective from the side view. So the shapes are going to change and they're going to start to overlap and things like that. So when you go and you look for an image, you want to find one that has some kind of context with the horizon. Now you can include an image that has part of the ground plane in, and you can shift it a little bit within the image so that the bottom of that image aligns with the horizon in the SketchUp model. But an image like this probably wouldn't work too well for this process. Now I'm in a parallel plan view. And one thing that you want to think about too is if you're going to include an image that includes some suggestion about where the sun is, what the pattern of the sun is at various times of year. We haven't really established where this pavilion is, whether it's in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. But just as an example, if I'm in the northern hemisphere, what happens throughout the year is that the sun, as you know, rises in the east and sets in the west, but it's going to take a different arc path from summer to winter. In the summer, it's going to, let me get a spotlight tool on, rise in the east, and the arc of the sun will go over the top of the model. So at noon in the middle of the summer, the sun is, roughly close to directly above you. But in the winter, the sun is going to take a much lower angle. Okay. So when you choose your images, you probably don't want the sun, if you're intending that your project is in the northern hemisphere. And all this would be opposite if you were in the southern hemisphere. And as we get closer to the equator, that angle will minimize in the winter months. But basically, you want to kind of choose an idea about where you think this would be. And when you find an image and it has some indication of where the sun is, you want to take those things into consideration. Now, in this view, I've dropped myself a little bit lower. So again, the eyes of the scale figures are going to be a little bit higher because they're higher relative to the ground than I am, from this vantage point. So I'm going to save this as another scene. Okay, there's scene 11. All right, now this view is looking east. So I'm going to look for an image that has some suggestion of the sun rising from the east. So once you've found an image, you can go to one of these 3D views, and I'm going to minimize that. Go to import from your device and browse to find the image that you'd like to use and bring it in as an image file. Okay, so I've got the image in here and I'm going to situate it on the back here. But before I do that, I'll place it so it aligns with the front, and I'll have an option to scale it. How big should you scale it? Well, it's going to take a little bit of adjustment. Okay, so I'll just make it the full width of my ground. And then I'm going to move it to the back. And also I'm going to move it so that the horizon is at roughly at the top of my ground plane. Right, now I'll go and see how it looks in the scene. And, you know, at that point, you can begin to make some more adjustments. So I'm going, it may be a little bit difficult to select it from here. So you may have to kind of go back and forth from the 3D view. But I feel like this particular image, that mountain profile is kind of blocking a little bit of the sky. So I'm going to try to drop it down lower. Go back to my 3D view, and you'll see here there's another image in the back, kind of experimenting with different images to see which one I like best. So I'll take this one and drop it a little bit lower. Maybe I may have to kind of give it some distance here, and you can kind of keep kind of playing around with it. Maybe I want the sun to appear more towards the left, so I can also move it in this direction. So again, you may have to kind of go back and forth from your scene to get it in the proper spot. So in this one, I'm seeing a little bit of the sun peeking over. Now you can see it's very pixelated. One thing that you can do when you do your search for the images is try to find one at a higher resolution. To sort of filter out some of the higher resolution images. When you do your Google search, if you click on tools, you can set the size to be a large image, and you should find that they come in a little bit bigger. But you can also adjust the size of the image in SketchUp. You know, maybe I didn't need to include, you know, I can maybe make this whole thing a little bit smaller, and that might have a better impact on the, but again, as you can see, there are these 3 images that I was experimenting with. It may take you a little while to find the right image that works with your particular scene. One way to adjust the size would be to select the image, go to the width section, and, you know, change these values. So I reduced the size of the image to, it was like at almost 4,000 feet wide. I made it 2,000. So you can see that the resolution is a little bit better for this one. So the last thing you may want to do, once you've kind of got the image worked out in the background, is, you know, I have been working with this default style here, but perhaps you want to look for one that maybe works a little bit better with the image that you've chosen. And keep in mind that when you put these together into a full presentation, you may want to find a common style to show all of the rendering, so it looks like it's all part of one project and there's some consistency to the presentation. So I'm just going through some of these. For some reason, my trees are not rendering properly in some of these styles, so I would obviously avoid that. Some possibilities here. Maybe that's a little bit too grainy. That one could work. Again, that one is having an issue with rendering the trees. This one is a little bit more of a sketchy sort of aesthetic. The possibility too. Yeah, it's like the darker ones seem to have some issues with the rendering of the trees. So basically, I'm going to choose one of these, generate, download an image file, and I'll repeat this process for 2 other scenes. So you'll be submitting 3 scenes for this assignment. Just one last thing, you may want to assign some kind of color to this ground plane. So I'm going to unlock it and I'm going to add a material. Perhaps for now, I'll just make it a white material, just so it gets lots of light, but you can always adjust it depending on how the renderings are turning out. And that's it for this assignment.